Hi everyone. Well, I wonder what you think of when I say the word evangelist. What type of person comes to mind? Now, today, as part of our Heroes of the Faith series, we're going to be looking at an evangelist from the Bible. But this person is not the sort of evangelist that you would immediately think of. In fact, this person is so obscure that we don't actually know her name. And yet, she's used by God in the conversion of one of the most powerful men of her age. So let's read about her. We're going to read the Bible. We're going to read 2 Kings chapter 5. And I'll read verses 1 to 3. Now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." Now, if you've never read 2 Kings 5 before, I would encourage you to do so. It's a cracking read. It's basically the story of the conversion of an outsider, Naaman, a non-Jew. And the story goes like this. Naaman is the commander of the Aramean army. And he's a great man. He's valiant, he's highly respected. And the Lord had given him great success. But unfortunately, he had leprosy. Enter a young slave girl. Now we're told 3 things about this girl in verse 2. First of all, she's an Israelite, so she's part of the people of God. Secondly, she's young. She's a child. And unlike in our culture today, back then children weren't seen as particularly important or significant. And thirdly, she had a really tragic past. So some raiders had gone out from Aram and they'd captured this girl and taken her to be a slave in the house of Naaman. Now, we don't know how all this came about, whether there was violence involved or her parents were murdered. But what we do know is that she's all by herself in a foreign land, serving a foreign woman. So those are the 3 things we're told about her. But there's a whole bunch of stuff we're not told about her. For example, we're not even told her name. We're not told very much about her at all. And it's like the writer of this chapter is deliberately contrasting the great man Naaman with this little girl and saying, she's a nobody. She's totally insignificant. And yet, she's used by God in the most extraordinary way. So in verse 3, she says to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." Now, despite having been treated terribly by the Arameans, this girl has compassion on her master and she wants to see him cured. But more significantly, she has great confidence in God. She clearly knows God, and she knows that God has a great prophet, Elisha, in Israel, and God is working through him. And so she says to her mistress, "Naaman can be healed. Go and see Elisha." And if you read on to the end of chapter, you'll see that Naaman is healed. And miraculously, he also comes to trust in God. So in verse 15, he says these words. Naaman says, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel." This little girl is instrumental in Naaman coming to faith. Now, she's not a hero particularly. She's pretty insignificant. But I wanted to focus on her today because she is an example of someone who used the situation that God had placed her in to speak of him and to make him known. And she wasn't particularly strategic or calculating. She just had great confidence in God. And as she went about her day-to-day routine, she spoke about the God that she knew. Now, friends, you and I are not particularly significant. I'm certainly not. But it's encouraging to be reminded that God often uses those who are most insignificant in the eyes of the world, those who are weak, to accomplish his purposes and to grow his kingdom. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you again on Monday.